Welcome to the Author's Den, where we present new and established authors and book releases ranging from fiction to sci-fi, all the way to historical, self-help, comic books, graphic novels, and everything else in between. Today's guest is media broadcaster and self-help guru Chris Lee. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Let's get right into it. You had a very traumatic injury where you sustained a very traumatic brain injury. Kind of walk us through that, because those were the seeds for your latest book.
Exactly. For my latest book, and also just for my life in general, to kind of get me on a whole different trajectory. So in 2007, on my way to work into downtown Detroit, I was rushing because I was running late for work. The freeway was backing up, and I said, I'm going to take a shortcut. Got off the freeway, headed through Southwest Detroit, which is a neighborhood I know like the back of my hand. My family's been in that neighborhood for like 2 generations. I had an untimely meeting. You know, the streets are real narrow. There's buildings here and there. Untimely meeting with a fire truck in the middle of an intersection. And I tell you what, I was so sure that I was going to die that I did not even tense up.
Were they on their way to a call? Or,
yeah, they were on their way to a call, and for whatever reason, at the moment that we met in that intersection, they did not have their sirens on.
Wow.
So it was just boom, and I sustained some physical injuries, but the brain injury was a life changer. I tell people at the time, I thought it was the absolute worst thing that ever happened to me, and you know, now here we are 10 plus years later, one of the best things that ever happened, because it put my life on a different trajectory.
Well, before we get to that trajectory, talk briefly about some of the short and long-term effects from that injury.
Yeah, so a brain injury, the way that I like to describe it is, imagine your entire life in a filing cabinet, and it's set up in order, it's color-coded, you got folders and everything in every drawer. For a brain injury, imagine taking that entire thing and then just dumping it, and then grabbing it all and shoving it back in there. Not nicely or the way that it was, just shoving it all in there.
Wow.
And now you have to spend the next few weeks or months, or in some cases years, trying to reorganize that information that was in your brain.
Goodness. Well, Addicted to Death, Overcoming Addiction Through Knowledge of Self. This isn't your first book. You've had other books, and we'll talk about that later on in the show. But this is your latest book. That title is loaded, covers a lot of ground. Just sort of break down what led you to coming up with that title and writing that book, and then kind of tie in that injury that you had with that.
For sure. So the title Addicted to Death came from my experience with various addictions, with alcohol, prescription painkillers, sleeping pills, food. You know, a lot of people don't talk about food addiction because it's not glamorous. They just say you eat too much. But so the title of the book, Addicted to Death, has to do with dealing with those things, because if you have those addictions, health-wise, they lead you to an early death. But I also talk about something bigger, having to do with us as people of color needing healing. And so healing the past, healing emotions that we don't like to deal with, and things of mindset that many of us have, that is the real addiction to death. For myself, I say that the addiction to the pills and the booze and the food, those were just a symptom. The real addiction was my toxic mindset. Yeah.
Now, as the book title implies about addiction, you're addicted to a life that you did not like, which was really grounded in the mindset that you're speaking of.
Yes.
So with that said, how did that impact your relationships, your health, your career?
Yep. So, and I used to be ashamed to admit this, but my old life caused me to be a very inauthentic person. It caused me to go along to get along. Fake it till you make it. But after sustaining a traumatic brain injury, I no longer had the brain power or the mental capacity to fake it anymore. So now here I was, forced to live for the first time as my authentic self, and I didn't know so much about my life that I did not like. Things needed to change.
Now, the book touches on you having to forge a new identity in order to connect to the authentic you. Kind of walk us through what that involved.
Yeah, it's pretty simple actually. So you have who you are, right? And then you have what you do. And if who you are and what you do mesh together, then you're in alignment with yourself, with your authentic self. But if who you are and what you do don't match up, then that causes resistance and you don't feel good. And all of us, no matter what we do, bad things, good things, whatever, everybody does what they do because they want to feel better. And so for me, reinventing myself had to do with my desire to feel better and finding a way to actually make that happen.
Explain how that impacted your relationships, like with family, with friends, kind of just walk us through the synergy of all that.
Yeah, so being inauthentic or not being in alignment with my true self caused me to, again, fake it till I make it with a lot of relationships. So there's a lot of times when you're with people, you end up being friends with people you have no business being friends with. You end up having relationships with people you have no business having a relationship because those people and their values are not aligned with you and your authentic values. And then over time, you end up losing yourself. You don't know who your own self is anymore.
Now, there's a mantra in your book, and we'll have you sort of break that down for us. If you have better information, you can make better choices. If we understand ourselves better than we understand each other, we'll understand each other better. In turn, we understand the world better and we'll begin to think differently. Just sort of break down the mechanics of that mantra. Better information leading to better choices, better life.
Yeah. So in life, you don't know what you don't know. And then the next thing that comes after that is now you know what you don't know. And then you're in a position to learn something new. I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, my grandmother was a diabetic. And sometimes her blood sugar would dip really low, which would cause her to kind of go into kind of like a daze. Sometimes she would even pass out. Now, when I was a kid, the first time that happened, I thought she had died. I was terrified. But then other relatives says, no, when that happens, you have to give her something sweet. That means her blood sugar dipped too low. When the blood sugar comes up, she'll be okay. So the second time, hey, I knew what happened. I had better information so I could make a better choice. Rather than call 911, I knew, okay, I can give her, a sip of juice and she'll kind of come around. And so that's kind of the philosophy of, having better information, making better choices. Knowledge of self piece comes in where you learn about yourself and then now you understand yourself better. You're able to understand everybody around you better and you're able to understand the world better, have a different worldview.
So it's all interrelated, all interconnected and all of that. Okay. Now, while this book is basically kind of a chronicalization of your personal journey, it's also somewhat of a self-help book. You have kind of like a workbook or workshop mechanism to it. Explain that and how people may benefit from reading that and apply it to themselves.
Yeah, for sure. So there's kind of two aspects to the book. There is the part that's a memoir where I tell my story and be vulnerable and kind of share everything that happened. There's also a part of the book that is being adapted into a workbook where I go through some of the things, the nuts and bolts of some of the things that actually helped me navigate the brain injury and also some of the things that helped me to move myself into a position mentally where I could be more successful. And that's the thing that I want to share with other people. I want to kind of help shorten the learning curve to greatness.
Yeah. Now, you've been sort of doing a lot of pre-promotion for the book. Anyone that goes on your social media pages, you will see a lot of the mantras and messaging from the book. What's been some feedback that you've gotten so far in the advanced stages of this pre-promotion effort?
Yeah, a lot of the feedback that I have gotten has been, we all have shared experiences, but the thing is, we often don't share those shared experiences. And so when I post snippets of the book, I've gone Instagram Live a few times, and I was blown away with how many people related to what I talked about in the book. For instance, one thing that I talk about in the book as a kid was reconciling who or what God is. As a kid, in my mind, God was this angry white man in the sky that killed bad people. And I'm like, that is not, and so I have a lot of friends that are church people, all different faiths and things like that. Yeah. So I was a little bit nervous about sharing that, growing up, that was my, that was my viewpoint of God. But there were so many people that resonated with and that understood that. There were so many people in the chapter where I talk about my father and how I felt like he and I did not have the best relationship, and how growing up I felt like my father did not pour into me like I wanted him to. But then towards the end of his life, I realized my father didn't have anything to give. He didn't have anything to pour into me. And just by being vulnerable and sharing different things like that, it's resonated with a lot of people, and it helps people on their healing journey as well when they realize, hey, I'm not alone.
Absolutely. It seems like some of those mindsets that you speak of in the book, they predated your accident. A lot of these mindsets began kind of at infancy sometimes and are reinforced throughout various experiences of your life. Yeah. How does the book talk about various mindsets that are formed early on in your life and how to sort of unlearn those and kind of just reprogram yourself?
Yep. So there's so much programming that comes from the media. And even though, you and I are both a part of the media, but there's so much, especially on a global level, there's a lot that goes into, so things that you see growing up, it could be something as simple of, as a kid growing up, seeing God depicted as a white man. Might not seem like a big deal. That's something that's kind of universally accepted, that this is God. There's things like that have an effect on your subconscious mind. Things that you see on the news, seeing how people of color are depicted when there's a news story. TV shows like Good Times.
Absolutely.
Is like a Black Gilligan's Island. Regardless of what happens, these people are stuck in the ghetto. Right? Yeah. And so those things all factor into our subconscious mind. And then internally, those are some of the external factors. Internally, some of the factors are the self-talk that we give to ourselves and the self-talk that we've received from our caregivers, from our parents, our aunts and uncles, the things that they said, that kind of shapes the voice in your head. And so there's a lot of quote unquote unlearning that needs to take place for us to be in a position to where we can do better and feel better and think better.
Man, this book really excites me, just the perspective it takes and just the way you're tackling some of these issues, many of them systemic and kind of long-standing. So I give you kudos on that.
Thank you.
Now, the book is slated for release very soon.
Yes.
What's the plan in terms of tours, events, activities around that? What's some of the initial promotional efforts behind it?
Yep, so I'll be doing a virtual book launch within the next few weeks. Because of things are kind of constantly changing with COVID and the Delta variant and all those things like that. I would have loved to have a big book release party and all that stuff. But so we're going to do a virtual release, and I'll be going on a virtual book tour. I have several podcasts that I'll be appearing on. I've got some speaking engagements set up. So just excited to be able to get this message out to people.
Absolutely. Now, this isn't your first book. We're going to discuss some of your other authored works. You've also written other books that include Our Truth Is Not a Lie, which was more of an anthology piece, From Frustration to Fulfillment, and The Soul of a Winner, which you co-authored. Explain the role those books have played in your development as an author and subject matter expert.
Yeah, for sure. So my very first book was From Frustration to Fulfillment. That book in detail chronicles my recovery from the brain injury. And that book actually started out as a journal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I started just kind of jotting down my thoughts. Because, see, I was having a hard time at that time because we all attach our self-worth to something. Yeah. One of the things that I had attached my self-worth was to my intelligence. And now, after the brain injury, that intelligence was essentially gone. Not the same guy that I was, back then. So that book started out kind of as a journal, basically me kind of complaining about my life. And it kind of got into a place where I started giving thanks for certain things. And then I just started chronicling this journey. And so that's what that book is about. And then the other books, the anthology, that book is myself and several other authors. Shout out to Chanel Spencer. She's the one that put that together. And I talk about what can you build from your broken pieces. And I talk about the ancient city of Tyre. Alexander the Great wanting to take that city, but it was an island and he couldn't get to it. But he didn't give up. And when he actually took the time to look into it, there was a sandbar 6 feet below, and they took the ruins from the city and they made a bridge and they got over there, used their broken pieces to achieve a goal. And that's kind of what that book talks about. And then those books helped me to arrive at this book, because this book doesn't really pull any punches. You know, I talk about things that I probably never would have talked about before in any of the other books, but I feel like that it's important to kind of let it all hang out, because we have shared experiences that people never talk about, and this is a part of the healing process. It's kind of shining a light on the things that are taboo that we don't want to talk about.
And it seems like just talking about some of these perceived taboo subjects is the first step to get on the road to healing.
Yeah.
It seems like that's a big part of your books as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. Now, you've also got a documentary in the works and will be dropping soon. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the documentary is called Love Her, and it is basically a celebration of Black women and kind of looks at the contributions that they have made to Black culture. And so it's something that was shot a while ago, but you know, now is the time. You know, with everything together and the climate that we're in socially, I think it's very important to give Black women their flowers, because they have done so much, not only for the Black culture, but for the world. And I don't think people realize that.
If you can kind of give us a little tidbit, who are some of the women that you cover in that? If you could give us a little glimpse into that. Yeah.
So part of it is talking about the women that everybody knows.
Okay.
You know, the big guns, Michelle Obamas of the world, and people like that. But part of it is talking to people that are not known worldwide, but people that are important, people that are making a difference in Detroit. One of the people that I interview is Goddess Alex. And she's in Detroit. She's a Detroit-based hairstylist. Entrepreneur. And she does something called therapy, or hairapy, hairapy, where, you know, she does her clients' hair and they talk and stuff like that. And it's just, I really feel like that's one of the centerpieces of the documentary. We also talked to a gentleman by the name of Rick Ector that is...
he's the proponent... firearm proponent.
Exactly. Yeah. And we follow him on the day that he taught 900 women how to use a firearm.
That was historic.
I
read about that in the news.
Yeah. And I had mixed feelings about it. You know, I felt some type of way about, like, you know, this is teaching all these people how to shoot. But talking to some of the women and hearing their experiences and knowing from seeing the news the types of things that bad guys do to women, and to see the empowerment and the confidence that learning how to shoot, even if they didn't buy a gun, just learning how to shoot, it was like, that was amazing to see. It was one of the most amazing parts of the documentary.
Now, you've also been a television, radio personality. Briefly talk about how those past experiences inform your work as an author now.
So those, you know, being a talk radio host for several years, it helps me to get a message across more succinctly. You know, when like for the first book, there was a lot of fluff. You know, and I worked with an editor. We cut it down. It ended up being like 90 pages. So being in the media and being a presenter and hosting television shows or radio shows helped me to deliver this message succinctly and to deliver it to a very wide audience by touching on things that we all have in common.
Awesome. Now, in terms of just the healing aspect of your book, there was a statement that I've been seeing on your promotional pieces. Emotional healing leads to emotional freedom. What does emotional freedom look and feel like? Yeah,
emotional freedom feels like being able to be your authentic self. Emotional freedom looks like, before I achieved emotional freedom, I was 330 pounds. Wow. And people always say, man, how did you lose weight? What did you do?
Yeah.
And I shed all of the baggage, all the emotional baggage that I had been, I did a few other things, but you know, nothing that would make you lose over 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And you know, so that's kind of what it looks and feels like. And it feels like, as a father and as a black man, emotional freedom is the freedom to show up for my kids, the freedom to show up for the people in my life that depend on me, and to be a mentor and a blessing to them instead of a burden and a bad influence in a you know.
Powerful statement, powerful. Now, what's one major takeaway that you hope readers take away or glean from your book?
Yeah, be your authentic self. Be you. Life is too short to fake it, to make it. However you feel, whatever it is that you want to do and accomplish, go for it. That thought, that idea is in your head for a reason.
And now you're quite vocal and regular in social media too. You do what are to me like informal workshops and things, so just to spark conversations and dialogue. How often do you do that, and where can people go to even follow that as well?
Yeah, so go to @ThinkChrisLee on all platforms, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And I have events probably about once a month. I'll go live, or sometimes I'll organize a formal event. And the big thing, again, is to get people together to have conversations, get things out in the open, have discussions, and just facilitate healing. Even if it's just a little bit of healing, that helps get people in a better position.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, it's been an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on, and best wishes on the book release and the tour. Feel free to come back anytime. Your chair has your name on it.
Thank you.
All right.